It was a Tuesday morning, the kind of quiet, sunny Tuesday that usually calls for a second cup of coffee and a crossword puzzle on the patio. I was actually just about to pour that second cup when my phone started buzzing against the granite countertop. It wasn't a polite little ping either. It was that aggressive, nonstop vibration that tells you the person on the other end is losing their absolute mind. I looked at the screen and saw the name Emily flashing in big, demanding letters. My daughter. I let out a sigh that rattled in my chest, took a sip of my coffee and swiped to answer. Before I could even get a hello out, her voice shrieked through the speaker so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Mom, are you there? Oh my God, tell me you haven't done anything stupid. The screen is blank. It's all blank. She was hyperventilating. I could hear the panic in her breath, the kind of panic you usually reserve for a house fire or a car crash. But I knew exactly what this was about. It wasn't a fire. It was numbers on a screen. Or rather, the lack of them. Good morning to you too, Emily, I said, keeping my voice calm, deliberate. I have learned over the last 6 months that the calmer I am, the more it infuriates them, and I would be lying if I said I didn't enjoy that just a little bit. What on earth are you shouting about at 9 in the morning? The bank account, she screamed. I just logged into the shared view portal to check. Just to check, Mom, for your safety, and it says, account not found, or access restricted. I can't remember which because I am shaking right now. Did you click a link? Did someone call you claiming to be the IRS? Please tell me you didn't give your social security number to anyone. I leaned against the counter, tracing the rim of my mug with my finger. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for, though I hadn't expected it to happen quite this early in the day. You see, my name is Evelyn. I am 72 years old. I worked as a forensic accountant for 30 years. I can balance a ledger in my sleep and I can spot a discrepancy from a mile away. But to my daughter Emily and my son Michael, I am simply vulnerable. That is their favorite word lately. Vulnerable. It is a code word. It sounds like they are worried about my well-being, but what it actually means is that they are terrified I am going to spend their inheritance before I have the decency to pass away. They had insisted on having view-only access to my main checking and savings accounts about a year ago, after Dad passed. They claimed it was just to monitor for fraud. They said, Mom, scammers target seniors every day, we just want to protect you. Sounded sweet at the time. I was grieving, I was tired, and I thought, why not? I have nothing to hide. But protection turned into surveillance very quickly. If I spent $200 at the garden center, I got a text. If I withdrew cash for the grandkids' birthday cards, I got a call asking what the cash was for. It was suffocating. And now apparently the feed had gone dark. Before I tell you what she accused me of next, I want to take a quick second to ask you guys something. I know families can be complicated, especially when money gets involved. Drop a comment down below and let me know where you are watching this video from and what time it is there. I always love seeing how global this community is, and honestly, reading your comments keeps me sane when I deal with drama like this. Okay, so back to Emily having a meltdown on the phone. I haven't clicked any links, Emily, I said, keeping my tone light. And I certainly haven't been talking to any scammers. Maybe the bank's website is just down. You know how technology is. No, Mom, it's not down. Her voice cracked. I checked my own accounts and they are fine. It is just yours. I called Michael already. He's freaking out. He says he tried to he tried to view the balance earlier and it gave him an error code. We're coming over. No, actually, meet us at the bank. The branch on Main Street. We need to get there before the hackers drain everything. I paused. She had slipped up. Did you catch it? She said Michael tried to transfer. My stomach did a little flip, not of fear but of vindication. I knew they were getting bold, but I didn't realize they were actively trying to move money around. The view-only access I gave them didn't allow transfers, so he must have been trying to log in as me, or he was attempting to use some power of attorney loophole they thought they had. Emily, honey, there is no need to rush to the bank, I said, adding a little feigned confusion to my voice. I'm sure it's just a glitch. I can call them later. We are not waiting for later, she yelled. This is exactly what we were afraid of. You don't take this seriously. You are losing your grip on the severity of the situation. Michael is picking me up. We will meet you at the bank in 30 minutes. Do not talk to anyone until we get there. And bring your ID. We are going to have to lock everything down. She hung up before I could argue. The line went dead and silence rushed back into my kitchen. I stood there for a moment looking at my reflection in the dark window of the oven. I didn't look vulnerable. I looked ready. They thought they were racing to the bank to save me from a hacker. They thought they were going to swoop in, declare me incompetent, and take full control of the assets for my own good. I finished my coffee, took a slow, deep breath, and walked to the hallway to grab my purse. I checked my reflection in the hall mirror, fixing my lipstick. If I was going to war, I was going to look good doing it. They wanted to go to the bank? Fine. We would go to the bank. But they had no idea that the glitch they were panicking about wasn't a mistake. It was a maneuver. And the man they were hoping to scream at, Mr. Harrison, the bank manager, was the only person in this whole town who actually knew the truth. I grabbed my keys. The drive to the bank was short, but it felt like the longest drive of my life. I wasn't nervous about the money. That was safe. I was nervous because today was the day the mask would finally slip. Today was the day I would have to look my children in the eyes and let them know that I knew exactly what they were. I pulled my sedan into the parking lot of the Main Street Bank branch, and sure enough, they were already there. Michael's leased luxury SUV was parked crookedly across two spots, a perfect metaphor for how he handled his finances generally, and Emily was pacing back and forth on the sidewalk, clutching her designer handbag like it contained nuclear launch codes. Seeing them there, looking so frantic and self-righteous, made my stomach tighten. Not with fear, but with a heavy, aching disappointment. You see, to understand why I wasn't panicking about the blank screen Emily had screamed about, you have to understand what the last 6 months of my life have looked like. It wasn't just one phone call. It was a slow, suffocating squeeze that they called love, but felt a lot more like a hostile takeover. It started shortly after the funeral. Michael and Emily have always been different. Michael is the dreamer, the entrepreneur, who always has a guaranteed investment that somehow requires $50,000 of someone else's money to get off the ground. Emily is the image-obsessed socialite who desperately needs her suburban neighbors to think she is wealthier than she actually is. For years, Dad kept them in check. He was the bad cop. He would say no before they could even finish their pitch. But when he died, they didn't see a grieving widow. They saw a vault door that had suddenly been left unlocked. The pressure campaign didn't start with demands. It started with doubt. That is the cruelest part. They tried to make me doubt my own mind. Remember that view-only access I mentioned earlier? The one I gave them for safety? That was their ammunition. A few weeks after I granted them access, Michael came over for dinner. He sat at my kitchen table eating the pot roast I had made and looked at me with these sad, pitying eyes. "Mom," he said, lowering his voice like he was breaking bad news. "I noticed a withdrawal for $300 at the electronics store last Tuesday. Did you mean to do that? Or did you get confused?" I stared at him. "I bought a new iPad, Michael. Mine was 5 years old." Right, he said, nodding slowly as if humoring a toddler. "It's just, you already have a computer. And a phone. Impulsive spending can be a sign of, decline. We just worry about you being taken advantage of by salespeople." It went on like that for months. If I tipped a server too much at lunch, I got a text from Emily asking if I understood the value of $1 anymore. If I forgot to call them back within an hour, they would group call me, claiming they were about to call the police because I was becoming forgetful. They were gaslighting me. They were rewriting the narrative of my life to paint me as a senile, incompetent old woman who couldn't be trusted with her own checkbook. And the reason was simple. Michael's latest business venture, a craft brewery that had no beer and no building, was failing, and Emily wanted to put in a swimming pool that cost more than my first house. They needed access to the capital, but they couldn't just ask for it because they knew I would say no. So they decided they had to take it. The breaking point, the moment that truly hardened my heart, happened 2 weeks ago. This was the event that led directly to today's showdown at the bank. They staged what I can only describe as an intervention. They came over on a Sunday, sat me down in my own living room, and Michael slid a folder across the coffee table. Inside was a brochure for a senior financial management service, and a printed email drafting a power of attorney. "Mom," Emily said, reaching out to squeeze my hand with clammy fingers. "We love you so much. But we can see you're struggling. You're spending erratically. You're vulnerable. We've spoken to the bank manager, Mr. Harrison, and we set up a meeting to discuss putting safeguards on your accounts. It's not taking your money away. It's just limits. We would have to approve any transaction over $50. Just to keep you safe. I looked at them. I looked at the brochure. I looked at the fake concern plastered over their greedy faces. They had already scheduled the meeting with Mr. Harrison without asking me. They were so confident, so sure that I was just a confused old lady who would sign whatever they put in front of her to make the tension go away. You set up a meeting? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. It's for the best, Michael said, puffing out his chest. We're going to go down there, sign the paperwork, and lock this down so you don't have to worry about money ever again. We'll handle the burden. Fine, I had said. I didn't fight. I didn't scream. I just said, fine. They took my compliance as victory. They thought I had surrendered. They didn't know that the moment they left my house that Sunday, I didn't go to sleep. I went to my home office, pulled out my old forensic accounting ledgers and started making a plan of my own. They wanted a meeting with Mr. Harrison? Oh, I would give them a meeting with Mr. Harrison. Back in the present, sitting in my car in the bank parking lot, I watched Emily stop pacing and point aggressively at my car as she spotted me. Michael was already walking toward my door, his face set in a mask of stern authority. They looked like vultures circling a carcass. They thought they were about to walk into that bank and have Mr. Harrison hand them the keys to the kingdom because Mom is vulnerable. They thought they were arriving for a coronation. They had no idea they were actually arriving for an execution. I unlocked my car door and stepped out into the sunshine. There you are. Emily shouted, rushing over. God, you drive so slow now. Come on, Michael says the accounts are completely inaccessible. We need to get inside right now and authorize the override before the bank freezes everything permanently. Calm down, Emily, I said, clutching my purse tight. I'm sure Mr. Harrison can explain everything. He better, Michael grumbled, grabbing my elbow to escort me or drag me toward the glass doors. Because if your confusion has cost you, your savings, we're gonna have to take drastic legal steps, Mom. For your own good. I let him lead me. I let him think he was in charge. Because I knew something they didn't. I knew that Mr. Harrison wasn't just a bank manager. He was an old friend of mine from the Rotary Club, and he had a very low tolerance for spoiled children. And I knew that the safeguards they were so desperate to install were about to snap back on them like a bear trap. To understand why I walked through those revolving glass doors with my head held high while Michael practically hyperventilated behind me, we have to rewind the clock about 4 days. Remember that disastrous Sunday intervention, where they treated me like a confused child? Well, the very next morning, while Emily was probably busy looking up swimming pool contractors and Michael was undoubtedly fantasizing about his non-existent brewery, I was sitting in the plush leather chair of Mr. Harrison's office. Mr. Harrison, Jim, as I've known him for 20 years, is the kind of banker who still believes in handshakes and looking people in the eye. He's about my age, with silver hair and a desk always covered in organized stacks of paper. When I walked in that Monday morning, he didn't look at me with pity. He looked at me with serious, grave concern. He stood up, closed his office door and actually locked it, which sent a little shiver down my spine. Evelyn, he said, sitting back down and folding his hands. I am glad you came in. I was going to call you later today. Your son, Michael, he called the branch on Saturday. And again this morning. I nodded, tightening my grip on my purse. I assumed he might. What did he say, Jim? Jim sighed and slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a call log. He's claiming that you are exhibiting signs of severe cognitive decline. He used phrases like fiscal irresponsibility and memory lapses. He specifically mentioned that $300 charge for the iPad you told me about last month, claiming you bought it because you forgot you had a computer. He wanted to know the procedure for freezing your assets pending a competency hearing. Hearing it out loud from a third party felt like a physical slap. It's one thing to suspect your children are greedy. It's another to have a professional confirm they are actively building a legal case against you. They weren't just worried. They were trying to strip me of my autonomy. They wanted to make me a prisoner in my own life, surviving on an allowance they deigned to give me, while they drained the accounts Dad and I had spent 40 years building. I see, I said, my voice steady, though my hands were trembling slightly. And what did you tell him? I told him that I cannot discuss client details without the client present, Jim said firmly. But Evelyn, he's pushing hard. If they file for emergency guardianship or get a doctor to sign off on something while you're under stress, they could freeze these accounts for real. They are using that view-only access you gave them to track your every move. They are building a case file on you. I looked at Jim. I am not incompetent, Jim. You know that. I did forensic accounting for 3 decades. I know exactly where every penny is. I know you do, Jim smiled, a genuine warm smile. Which is why we are going to outmaneuver them. Right now. Before their little meeting they scheduled for later this week. This is where the alliance was formed. Jim explained that because the current accounts were joint with my late husband initially, and then modified to give the kids viewing access, they were vulnerable to this kind of interference. But as a mentally competent adult, I had the right to move my funds wherever I pleased. We are going to open a new portfolio, Jim explained, pulling out a fresh stack of forms. It's a high-security, senior-protected trust account. It's completely invisible to standard online banking. No app access. No view-only portals for relatives. The only way to move money out is for you, Evelyn, to walk into this office, show your ID and sign a document in front of me. It's old school. It's inconvenient for modern banking, but for your situation, it is a fortress. I didn't hesitate. Do it. Move it all. The savings, the investment dividends, the checking balance. Leave the old accounts open, but drain them down to the minimum balance required to keep them active. Jim's eyes twinkled. He knew exactly what I was doing. If we closed the accounts entirely, the kids would get a notification immediately. But if we just moved the money, the accounts would stay active. Until the moment the system updated the balances or they tried to look deeper. We spent the next 2 hours signing paperwork. My hand cramped, but I didn't care. With every signature I felt lighter. I was building a wall that Michael and Emily couldn't climb. We transferred the bulk of the estate, everything that they were drooling over, into this new ghost account, as I called it in my head. When we were done, Jim handed me a copy of the receipt. The transfer will finalize in 48 hours, he said. By the time they drag you in here for their intervention, the money will be gone. The old accounts will show 0 or access restricted, because the link to the funds will be broken. They are going to panic, I said, tucking the receipt into the hidden zipper pocket of my purse, the same purse I was carrying today. Let them, Jim said, leaning back. They tried to play a game with a forensic accountant. They should have known better. So as I walked into the bank lobby with Michael gripping my arm and Emily screeching about hackers, I wasn't a victim. I was a trap waiting to be sprung. I saw Jim standing by his office door across the lobby. He caught my eye for a split second and gave the tiniest, almost imperceptible nod. He was ready. I was ready. There he is. Michael barked, spotting Jim. Mr. Harrison, we have an emergency. My mother's accounts have been compromised. I just smoothed my jacket, took a deep breath of the cool, conditioned air, and prepared myself for the performance of a lifetime. They wanted a show? I was about to give them one they would never forget. Mr. Harrison ushered us into his office, the same office where we had conspired just a few days prior, but the atmosphere today was entirely different. It was thick enough to cut with a knife. Michael marched in first, practically vibrating with self-importance, and threw himself into one of the guest chairs. Emily hovered behind him, looking like she was about to faint, while I took the seat nearest the window, folding my hands in my lap and playing the role of the bewildered matriarch to perfection. This is unacceptable, Harrison, Michael started before Jim could even sit down. Absolutely unacceptable. My sister and I have been trying to access the monitoring portal all morning. It's dead. We drove here thinking my mother had been hacked by some overseas scammer, but looking at her. He gestured to me with a dismissive wave of his hand, like I was a piece of broken furniture. It's obvious she's done something. She probably clicked a phishing link or gave her password to a Microsoft support caller. We need to lock this down immediately. Jim sat down slowly, adjusting his glasses. He didn't look at Michael. He looked right at me. Evelyn, are you okay? I'm fine, Jim, I said softly, keeping my eyes wide and innocent. Just a little overwhelmed. Michael drives very fast. She's not fine. Emily snapped, finally sitting down next to me. She's confused, Mr. Harrison. We've been telling you this for weeks. She's buying electronics she doesn't need, she's forgetting conversations. And now the accounts are wiped? We need to invoke the vulnerable client protocol. Right now. Michael has the paperwork prepared. Michael slapped a leather folder onto Jim's desk. Power of attorney, he declared. and a request for immediate freezing of all assets followed by a mandatory spending cap of $200 a week for her personal use. We will manage the rest. We need to stop the bleeding before the hackers, or her own incompetence, drains the estate dry. I watched Jim pick up the folder. He didn't open it. He just held it, feeling the weight of their greed in his hands. It was amazing, really. They weren't even asking if the money was safe yet. Their first instinct wasn't recover the lost funds, it was seize control of the account. That told me everything I needed to know. If there was any tiny shred of guilt left in my heart about what I had done, it evaporated right there in that air-conditioned office. So, Jim said, his voice dangerously calm. Just to be clear, you want to restrict your mother's access to her own life savings because you believe she is incapable of managing them. It's not what we want, Michael lied, smoothing his tie. It's what is necessary. Look at the screen. The accounts are gone. We need to gain authorization so we can track down the missing funds and then manage them properly. Right, Jim said. The missing funds. He turned to his computer. The clicking of his keyboard was the only sound in the room for a solid 10 seconds. Emily was chewing her thumbnail. Michael was tapping his foot so hard the floor was shaking. I just watched a bird fly past the window, feeling a sense of calm that was almost spiritual. Well, Jim said, spinning the monitor around so we could all see it. I can explain why you received an error message on your view-only portal. Michael leaned forward, his eyes hungry. Was it a hack? Can we reverse it? It wasn't a hack, Jim said. On the screen, the main checking account, the one that usually held a comfortable 5 figures, showed a balance of $0. The savings account, which held the bulk of Dad's life insurance and their inheritance, also showed $0. There were no pending transactions. No frozen flags. Just zeros. The silence that followed was heavy, heavy silence. It was the sound of two people's dreams of swimming pools and craft breweries imploding in real time. 0. Emily whispered, her voice trembling. What do you mean 0? Where is it? Did they steal it all? Michael stood up, his face turning a violent shade of red. This is negligence. Absolute negligence. How could the bank let a scammer drain everything? I warned you. I told you she was vulnerable. I'm going to sue this branch into the ground. I want a tracer put on those funds immediately. He was shouting now, spitting as he spoke. He turned to me, his eyes wild. Mom, what did you do? Who did you talk to? Did you send money to someone? Think, Mom, think. I looked at him and I let the mask slip just a fraction. I stopped hunching my shoulders. I sat up straighter. I looked him dead in the eye, the confused old lady, vanishing for just a second. I didn't talk to anyone, Michael, I said clearly. I didn't send any money to a prince in Nigeria. And I certainly didn't buy another iPad. Then where is it? He roared, slamming his hand on the desk again. Money doesn't just vanish, Mom. It has to go somewhere. You are right, Jim interjected, his voice cutting through Michael's hysteria like a blade. Money does not just vanish. And I can assure you, Michael, that the bank's security protocols are working perfectly. No unauthorized person has accessed these accounts. No hackers. No scammers. Then explain the zeros. Emily shrieked. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. If it wasn't stolen, where is it? Jim looked at Michael, then at Emily, and finally settled his gaze on me with a look of professional respect. He clasped his hands together on the desk, leaning forward slightly. The tension in the room was so high I thought the windows might shatter. This was the moment. The climax of the play. My children were frothing at the mouth, demanding control over a kingdom that had already been moved to a different continent. They were holding the handcuffs they wanted to put on me, but they had just realized there was nobody left to arrest. The reason you cannot see the money and the reason you cannot control the money, Jim began, pausing for maximum effect, is actually quite simple. The reason you cannot see the money, Jim repeated, his voice steady and loud enough to silence the room, is because it is no longer in these accounts. Mrs. Evelyn transferred the entire balance to a new private holding 4 days ago. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet, it was a vacuum. It sucked the air right out of the room. Michael's mouth hung open, his jaw literally dropping in a way you usually only see in cartoons. Emily stopped chewing her nail and just froze, her eyes darting back and forth between me and the empty computer screen. Transferred. Michael croaked, the words scraping out of his throat. Transferred where? To. We have alerts set up. I didn't get an alert. You didn't get an alert because the alerts are tied to the joint checking and savings accounts, Jim explained, leaning back in his chair with the satisfaction of a man who had been waiting all week to say this. Your mother opened a senior wealth protection trust. It is a completely separate entity. It is not linked to your view-only access. It does not have an online portal. And it is strictly under her sole control. But she can't do that. Emily stammered, her face flushing a splotchy red. We have a pending. We are discussing her competency. She isn't in her right mind. She probably didn't even know what she was signing. That was the moment. That was the cue I had been waiting for. I slowly unclasped my hands, reached into my purse and pulled out a packet of tissues. But instead of dabbing my eyes, I used one to wipe a smudge of lipstick off my teeth, checking my reflection in the darkened window. Then I turned to my children. I dropped the slump in my shoulders. I let the confused old lady tremble vanish from my hands. I looked at them with the sharp, cold clarity of the forensic accountant I had been for 30 years. I knew exactly what I was signing, Emily, I said. My voice was different now. No quivering. No hesitation. It was the voice I used to use in courtrooms when I was testifying against embezzlers. In fact, I read the terms and conditions 3 times. I even caught a typo on page 4. Michael recoiled as if I'd slapped him. Mom? You sound lucid, I suggested, raising an eyebrow. Sharp? Not vulnerable? I stood up, smoothing down my skirt. I heard everything you said, Michael. I heard you call me incompetent. I heard you plotting to put me on an allowance of $200 a week. Do you have any idea how insulting that is? I managed the household finances for 40 years. I built that portfolio with your father. And you thought you could just walk in here and take it because I bought an iPad. We were trying to protect you. Michael yelled, though his conviction was wavering. He looked panicked now. We were trying to stop you from making mistakes. No, Jim interjected, standing up to stand beside me. You were trying to control the assets. And I have to tell you, Michael, as the bank manager, I conducted a full competency review with your mother when she opened the new trust. She is as sharp as a tack. There are no grounds for freezing anything. The money is hers. It is safe. And you have absolutely no access to it. No view only. No transfers. Nothing. So what happens now? Emily whispered, tears finally starting to well up. Real tears this time, tears for her lost swimming pool. You're just cutting us off? I'm not cutting you off from my love, I said, softening just a fraction because I am still their mother even if they are fools. But I am cutting you off from my wallet. The bank of Mom is closed. If you want money for a brewery, Michael, go to a bank and apply for a loan like an adult. If you want a pool, Emily, save up for it. But you will not treat me like a senile invalid just to get your hands on your inheritance early. I picked up my purse. Now, if you'll excuse me, Jim and I have some coffee to finish. You two can see yourselves out. Michael, move your car. You're taking up 2 spaces. They didn't move for a long time. They just sat there, stunned, processing the fact that their coup had failed spectacularly. Finally, Michael grabbed his leather folder, the useless power of attorney paperwork, and stormed out without a word. Emily followed him, looking back at me with a mixture of shock and fear before hurrying out the door. When the door clicked shut, the silence returned to the office, but this time it was peaceful. Move your car, Jim chuckled, shaking his head. That was a nice touch, Evelyn. I try, I smiled, finally letting out a long, deep breath. Thank you, Jim. For everything. I walked out of that bank feeling 10 years younger. The sun was shining brighter, the air smelled sweeter, and my phone, which had been blowing up with their demands for months, was blissfully silent. They knew now. They knew I wasn't a victim. I wasn't vulnerable. I was their mother and I was still the one in charge. It's been a week since the showdown. They haven't called to ask for money. They haven't called to check my spending. They call just to say hi, and the conversations are short, awkward, and polite. It's exactly how I like it. I have my money, I have my dignity, and most importantly, I have my peace. And that is the story of how I outsmarted my own children and moved my entire fortune right under their noses. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I know it was a bit of a roller coaster, but I hope it brings some satisfaction to anyone out there dealing with controlling family members or people who underestimate them. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more like it, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Also, I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had someone try to control your life or your money for your own good? How did you handle it? Let me know down below. I read every single comment. Until next time, stay sharp, stay safe, and never let anyone make you feel like you're less than you are. Bye for now.